right. Hey, everybody. Thank you for coming out here to logging on to our final project showcases. We have got 5 awesome people here today that are going to take us through their final projects for their software engineering uh, courses. We will get to check out what they've built, hear a little bit about why they decided to build the things they did. You'll get an opportunity to ask them questions, how they built it, how they went around doing these things. Feel free to use the chat to ask any questions. We'll take a minute at the end of each presentation to kind of go through those and give them an opportunity to answer any questions. And then we'll move on to the next person. Uh, feel free to give out virtual snaps and high fives in the chat when everybody finishes up theirs as well, just to celebrate the awesome work that everyone here has done. Kicking us off today is going to be Michael. He's going to take us through his project.
Hey everybody. Everybody see my screen? Cool. All right. So yeah, my name is Michael Dowley. I'm a software engineer and environmentalist, and just generally love the outdoors. Every morning, I take my dog for a hike. This is him right here. It's Parsley, brown guy. I usually bring a bag with me, and I pick up any trash I see. But unfortunately, I live in a big city, and it would take me like 1,000,000 bags to pick up all of the trash in Philadelphia. So I decided to create Everybody's Trash. Everybody's Trash is a web app that allows users to, when they see salvageable trash on the street, they can tag it and it'll show up on a little map, and then other users can click on it, get some more information, and go find it if they want to pick it up. So let's take a look at it. So when you go to the page, it's basically just a landing page. It'll give you information about how to use the site and some depressing facts about all the waste that we create every year. If you log in, it'll take you to the real kind of main focus of the app. So here's a little map shows up, and here you can see it's already populated with some of the trash. Right now, it just kind of defaults to Center City, Philly, because that's where I live. I also allow it to grab my location. So this is my house right there. Don't dox me, please. But yeah, so here's all the trash that's in the database right now. You can click on it. It shows like a little picture of it with the title. You can also click on it over here in this list view. So say we want to look at this green couch, kind of flies to it on the map. We can see description of it, title, and then a couple tags. And then if I went and grabbed this couch, I could click mark as picked up and it would delete it from the app. In this view, I can also add trash to the map. So click on this, say I'm driving around, I see some trash. Click add trash. I mark on the map where I saw it. Gives it a title. Upload a picture. This usually takes like a second. Category. Description. I can add some tags. This is a picture of a Chuck E. Cheese animatronics. So the robots, probably haunted. And then I add the trash. You can see it show up there on the map. It's over here. Oh, what the, sorry. Back. Over here on the list view. You can click on it. There's the picture, tags. And the cool thing about the tags is, say that I'm a weirdo who's trying to collect haunted knickknacks. I can go to the wish list, type in haunted. It'll show all of the trash in the database that's tagged with the tag haunted. And same thing, I can do a little detailed view when I click on it. The last little piece of functionality is there's a bulletin board. So if you have like a ton of stuff you're trying to get rid of, too much to put on the street, or you're looking for something in particular, you can make a post about it. So here I'm logged in as Donnie. Donnie needs jars. He's got a little post saying how he needs jars. There's another user who commented saying they have 2 jars. I can comment saying thanks so much or whatever. Post it, or if it's like really urgent, I need those jars right now, I can click on this little chat bubble, pulls up a chat. I can say, hey, give me, there's a little chat that comes up there, the message, and then I'm over here, I'm logged in as user. You can see user's got a little notification down here. It says Donnie sent a message. I click on that. Here's the message from Donnie, and I can respond. It shows up over here real time. He doesn't have to reload or anything. It just shows up. And that is basically it for the app. I created it. The front end was React. The back end is the Rails, Ruby on Rails API. I did the map with something called Mapbox, the library, and the chat functionality is Action Cable. Those last two, chat functionality and the map, are kind of like the biggest challenges to creating the app. It's a lot of reading documentation and doing tutorials to figure out exactly what data I wanted to show and how to manipulate it to get it to do what I wanted. As far as the future of Everybody's Trash, I think it works best as like a mobile app. I want it to be like just the map view, basically. Maybe learn how to do it in React Native. So when you see a trash, take a picture of it on the street and just upload it right away instead of having to like go to a website. But yeah, that is it. The website is live. You guys can all go check it out on Heroku. There's the URL. And if you guys have any questions or want to connect, it's my LinkedIn. And that's it. Thank you for watching.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Michael. Any questions for Michael about Everybody's Trash? And the app looks great. My 5-year-old daughter would love it. She wants to be a trash scientist because she hates when we're driving down the street and see garbage. Her big goal is to build a robot to go pick up trash.
Nice. We can start a company together.
Yeah, yeah. We need an intern. She doesn't clean up very much, but she's got big goals. All right. Any other questions that roll in, or any questions that roll in, feel free to type them in the chat, and then Michael can answer them in the chat as we have our next speaker, Nasheen, up next.
Thanks. Michael, my app wants to be your app when it grows up. All right, so my name is Nasheen, and I'm a software engineer, English teacher, and mom to an amazing boy. There he is right there, trying to sneak into someone else's boat. So I teach a unit on zoos in which we discuss the pros and cons of keeping animals in captivity. When I brainstormed my idea for creating an endangered species tracker for my phase 5 project with my son, his eyes lit up and he started firing off the names of all the endangered animals he wanted to see on the list. My students were just as excited when I informed them. So I had an audience and I had a purpose. I knew I wanted to create a kid-friendly and a grown-up-friendly single-page application with species cards that would contain pictures and information about all the interesting species that are on the brink of extinction. I wanted my application to allow users to add species information and comments. I also wanted to include conservation effort resources. And because humans have just as much power to revive endangered species populations as they do to diminish them, I wanted the site to not just provide information, but also give hope and tools to take action in conservation efforts. I created a Rails API backend to store all my data. There wasn't a public API I could use to fetch the data I needed, so I collected images and information from several sites, including the endangered species, endangered status, population, habitat, and conservation efforts. I created the Rails API using Scaffold, which set up all the CRUD actions and the controller that I needed, and the models that inherited from Active Record and created the necessary associations. So if you look at what the backend looks like, if you fire up the browser, this is all the information regarding and the African forest elephant, for example. I created a React.js Redux front-end single-page application that renders the species cards and provides a form to add species to the list. New species are added to both the front and back end using the Redux global store. The code for this application is written within the React framework using the JSX library, which is a combination of JavaScript logic and HTML markup. I also used some CSS and Bootstrap for styling. There we go. So this project brings together all of my learning from Ruby on Rails, JavaScript, React, and Redux. My front-end application is written in components, which are bits of reusable code and further organized within containers. All but the forms are stateless components. One of my favorite features is the nav bar, which using the router provides internal links for client-side routing. The flow of the front-end application starts with the home page, which is the default route. From there, a user might click on the species list link. The species container component triggers the species list fetch request, which is housed in the species actions file. Actions are files that are conventionally used to store fetch requests. The species cards are then rendered. If the user clicks on add a species, the species form renders. And once the user submits a species, it is added both to the back end and to the set of species cards on the front end. The application uses both props and state, the fundamental ways to store and pass bits of information. The form components use state to add and modify information about species objects. And the list component uses the attributes of the species retrieved from the fetch requests and renders them. Challenges. So there were so many challenges in this project, from fetching correctly and configuring the connect method to updating syntax that was recently outdated. One memorable challenge I overcame involved my routing. I had all my data in place, the backend was working, the code in my front end looked right to me, and I couldn't trace my error despite days of rechecking and Stack Overflow research. I was close to the deadline and everything was broken. I finally reached out to my instructor and an expert set of eyes finally found the error. I had placed my nav bar within my router, and she reminded me that all the containers and major components are housed within the app.js file. It ended up being a simple fix and a lesson never to be forgotten. So this project is a work in progress, and since graduating from Flatiron, I've been acquiring new skills and building on my project. I want to add user authentication, likes, and comment features. I'm still trying to figure out how to add working external links and make my organization form functional. So Flatiron has definitely been an exciting and challenging journey. I'm growing as a developer every day and looking forward to continuing my journey. That's my LinkedIn, blog, and email. So if you want to get in touch.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Nasheen. Great work. Any questions in the chat for Nasheen? All right. If any questions drop in there, we can see if we can get them answered. Nasheen is super dedicated, and it is way early where she's at right now, so she might go ahead and hit the hay. Thank you, Nasheen.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
See ya. All right, up next is Juhyun or Steve.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jihan. Don't sweat it if you can't pronounce that. I also go by Steve. And I really don't have a preference. My family and my fiance call me Jihan. A lot of my friends call me Steve. So whichever works best for you works for me. The app that I'm going to be showcasing for you today is a project called the NOBRAC Initiative. But first, a little bit about myself. I'm a full stack web developer. I graduated from Flatiron in April. Currently, I'm also a full-time job seeker, which I might add so far definitely feels like a full-time job of its own. But anyway, I'm originally from South Korea. I moved to the US when I was about 5, lived in New Jersey for about 5 years, moved back and forth between the US and Korea, where I briefly worked as a journalist and also in education. And now I'm currently in New York, hoping to launch a career in tech. So as I said before, the app that I'm going to be sharing with you is called the NOBRAC Initiative, and it's basically an awareness campaign for climate change and global warming. And one of the main features that I built into it is a carbon footprint calculator. And some of you might see it now, but the name NOBRAC is really just carbon spelled backwards. So it sort of implies that the goal is to reduce our carbon emissions and hopefully reverse some of the damage that we've done to our planet. So the main motivation behind this project was, well, so when I first made the decision to become a software engineer, I enrolled into Flatiron School. I had this very broad and general idea that I wanted to build something useful or meaningful on a very human level. And what I mean by that is I truly believe that technology at its core is not to just provide convenience to people, but although that's a very huge benefit, I think the real goal of technology is to provide real life solutions to real life problems. And so I'm not like an environmental activist or anything like that, but I just wanted to contribute in some positive way, shape, or form to a cause that I thought was important. And for me, I decided that was climate change. And so without further ado, I will show you a brief demonstration of the application. So again, this is the landing page, just some basic information about the application, global warming, why I decided to make it. Immediately, there's a call to action to take a quiz for the carbon footprint calculator. If you scroll down, there's going to be some more information. And then at the end, I have another call to action that leads to the carbon footprint calculator. So if you go to learn more, just some more information, some charts and things like that, I highly encourage you to come check it out. There's a subtle difference between when we say climate change and global warming. So just kind of describes that in detail. There's more charts too. So, if you want to compare between global stats and US stats, you can do that. But the meat of the application is, of course, the carbon footprint calculator. And that's when you go to take a quiz. It's a series of questions, about 13 questions total. It'll ask you questions like, do you own a car? If yes, like how many miles do you drive per year? Let's say like 10,000 miles. And I'm not going to put data into all of these, but do you ride public transit? What kind of public transit do you use? Do you do any air travel? Yes, no. If you do, what kind of flights you take? How much is your average electricity bill, gas bill, water bill? And then some of the food that you consume. If you click on any one of these, you can put in the input, how much you spend per month. There's also how much you spend on beverages. If you ever eat out, what type of dining experience you take part in, limited, full service, other eateries. And each of these will of course have an input that you can put in. Whether you smoke, how much you spend on the goods, services, and recreational activities. And once you get to all 13 questions, then when you hit next, that's where it calculates your carbon footprint in metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. And we put some horrible data in there, but ideally, if you have different categories, it'll show you a good breakdown of where your carbon emissions are going. It'll compare your data to the US average and the global average and tell you that as well. And then you can save your result. If you're logged in, it'll just save. If you're not, it'll prompt you to log in. So I'll just quickly do that. So once you're logged in, then you can save your results. And then the idea is to kind of just track over time your carbon footprints, just to see if you're doing a better job, if your carbon emissions are going up or down. And if you click on any one of them, you'll be able to kind of look at the graph again. And below, just some more tips and advice on how you can reduce your carbon footprint. So pretty much basic information that I encourage you to come and take a good read. like eating less meat, buying, clothes from recycled materials, avoiding excessive plastic, and so on and so forth. So that's pretty much the gist of this. Oh, and you can always delete your footprints too if you don't need them. And that's pretty much it. So back to the slides. So the tech that I used, basically on the back end, Ruby on Rails, Node, and Express. React on the front end using only functional components and hooks, and then Redux for my global state management tool, and then React Router for client-side routing, and then some additional libraries like Chart.js for that wonderful like donut diagram that you saw. And then finally Material UI for things like drawers and snack bars and things of that nature. So challenges that I face. Project certainly gave me quite a few challenges as well. But a lot of it also just came down to, I think, making certain design decisions, especially in terms of like how I wanted the user experience to be and how I wanted the user to interact with the application. But I would say that the main challenge that's worth pointing out probably had to do with using a third-party API. So in my case, I used Climatic API, and I had to conform to their rules and guidelines on how they wanted me to interact with their API. So for instance, making sure to securely hide the API keys, because using like an environment file and then not pushing it to GitHub will actually not be enough to completely hide the keys. Because when you're using something like Webpack to bundle your code, you can actually inspect the source from the browser and actually see the keys inside of your request headers. So the way I worked around this was by building out sort of like a mini backend using Node and Express, which kind of acts as like the middleman. And so what happens is the application is actually fetching from my own backend, which is essentially relaying the information it gets back from the API to our application. And then the other thing I also spent a lot of time on was making sure to properly sanitize the user input. Especially if you remember from the demo, people might choose to like leave certain categories blank, or they might navigate back and forth between the questions. And so all that had to be like accounted for, just to ensure that like when the user submits the form, we are sending data in the exact format that the API is expecting to receive. But I think overall, personally, this project in particular was like a really good learning experience for me. And I think I definitely came out of it feeling like I've grown and leveled up as a developer. So that was really great. Some things that I would like to hopefully add and implement in the future, perhaps including more regions, so that it's not just for people in the US, but maybe other countries as well. The API that I'm currently using calculates the carbon dioxide equivalent based on US data. So it would be great to expand it to include more countries. Maybe also including the option to choose like different units like kilometers or euros. And then lastly, providing users with even more practical tools, like perhaps adding a feature to locate nearby recycling centers, or integrating other APIs to like make it easier to find greener modes of transportation, like city bikes, for example. So yeah, those are some things, ideas down the road. And that's it. You can check out the app here, contact me in any of these social media, and thank you.
Awesome work. Awesome work. App looks great. Yeah, no. Awesome, awesome stuff. Any questions in the chat? All right. Anybody has any questions in the chat, feel free to pop them in there, and we will hop to our next person here, Tywin. You are up next.
Thank you. Let me share my screen really quick. My screen. All right. So yeah, I'll start with a little intro. Name is Tywin. I'm an artist and software developer. I think for the year prior to started Flatiron, I was doing art like this, where I would track my keystrokes for a year and 3D print the keys depending on how many times I pressed it. So I was doing a lot of gaming during the pandemic. But my app today that I want to show is called Investigate. And
as it says in the subhead, it's essentially a platform that allows users to create and share notes about the Ethereum blockchain, about specific blocks and transactions. And so my inspiration for this came from being on Twitter and seeing a lot of narratives about exploits and hacks and scams. And there's this users like these who will walk through and how these scammers actually were stealing money. And so I really enjoyed reading these, and I noticed there's like kind of multimedia. They would share screenshots and oftentimes links to a site like Etherscan, which is sort of a site that tracks all the granular activity on the blockchain. But one thing you'll notice from both of these sites is that Twitter and Etherscan alike are really crowded UI. It's a little messy, noisy, it's hard to parse. So, and I want to create a platform where users could create these narratives in a more confined space that would standardize and make the experience a little more clean. So if I go to the Explore page here, you don't need to log in yet to read it. Let's open one of these. And so here I've opened a single block, and this block happens to have 37 transactions. On the left-hand side, you get data, which is pulled from an API. It's actually two APIs. It's one called Etherscan and one called Alchemy. And you get all the specific data. You get like this hash receipt, gas and GUI. And if you're not familiar with blockchain stuff, these like really weird terms, but these are basically specific measurement of how much like of the activity on the transaction. And on the right hand side, you get what the user wrote about this specific transaction. And I can these are fully shareable. So if I open a private window, I can read it without having to log in. So I imagine you can embed these links anywhere. On the left hand side, I get more metadata. But I'll show how you want to make one of these yourself. If you want to make a say a narrative about the transactions, the way I have it, you don't have email sign up, and I sort of assume this is for a very specific audience. You'll have a MetaMask extension in your browser, which is a crypto wallet. And what I'm doing here is a sort of a public-private key encryption. To do authentication, you sign this nonce with your private key, and that validates that you are you. So if I sign that, I will log in. I get a different state. If I go over to my sample data, I was going to use, I think, this one. I can copy this from Etherscan, excuse me, paste it in here, and I'm doing some validations as well. So if you try and enter something that's not actual transaction, it'll tell you. And here it'll pull data from the APIs, and I have the option to start doing some titling. I could title this narrative. I can add notes about this specific user. This is all markdown. Let me see. So I have this rich text editor, which I really like. So you can just say, this is a known scammer. And the other thing I'm doing is I'm actually pulling down the actual smart contract data. And a smart contract is basically a mini app that runs on the blockchain. You can actually read the code that's running. And further down, I'm also parsing the logs, which is a little bit like a stack trace. So you can see the actual methods that were called and what values were put into the parameters. So you can actually go down to that level and say, like, this is a blah, 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 something. And as on the left-hand side, I have this saving mechanism, which tracks the delta and updates when you make new saves. And when I save it, I can go back to the Explore page, and you'll see my new narrative popped up here. I can edit it again, open it, or go to my home page where I have it all aggregated. Yeah, that is mostly the app. And I guess we'll go over quickly the sort of challenges that I ran into. The first one was getting this sign-in mechanism to work. They use a library called Sign In with Ethereum, which is like EIP 4361 compliant. It's like up to protocol for doing off-chain authentication. And I use a library called React Query, which is actually quite helpful. It basically is supposed to mitigate having to use state and use effect. It just kind of combines them into one. And so it's easier for data fetching. It's a standard way, rather than, since React doesn't come with it. And the last thing I sort of ran into was a lot of these, let's say, like these stack traces, the way that the API renders them, they're big numbers or big ints in JavaScript, which is like a terrible data type. And So it was really a headache to work with that. And I finally like learned how to parse it and all that. But that was one big thing, was fighting with JavaScript to get this to work. And yeah, I guess I'll share my last, this is my little business card. My email, website, and my repo are there as well. And yeah, so thanks for watching. I can answer any questions.
Awesome. Any next steps for Investigate for your app?
Yeah, I think I would want to add another tab to write about specific addresses. Addresses can be people or apps themselves. So being able to have further notes and having maybe more social, like being able to tweet it directly, and having more integrations with other APIs.
Awesome. All right, we'll give it another minute here in the chat, and then we'll get to our last presenter, Joe. Awesome, awesome, awesome. All right, anything that comes into the chat, we'll be watching. Joe, take it away.
All right, let me get my screen set up. Right. And here we go. And we don't go. Okay.
I think we got, okay, there we go. We're zoomed way in.
Now here we go. All right. With that out of the way, my name is Joe Dietrich. I am a full stack developer and a product manager. Split my time between Philadelphia and New York, just moved to Philly. So question, have you ever wanted to collaborate with your roommates on design decisions? Have you ever wanted to display your dog pictures to the world? Have you ever wanted to store photographs easily, safely, and effectively? And I have. So I created Wise Album. Now, Wise Album was really I say those things. The genesis of Wise Album was my day job. I was trying to figure out a way that I could store a lot of pictures without having to pay through the nose for a service. So I decided to build my own. Wise Album is a multi-tenant, multi-user application where you can store images and videos. You can build and share media galleries and collaborate with others. I built Wise Album using Ruby on Rails, React, and styled components, Ruby on Rails on the back end. It's hosted on Heroku, the back end at least. And the front end and the media are stored on AWS using S3 buckets and CloudFront distributions, so it's fast and responsive. Now I'll give a little bit of a walkthrough of the application. So you see on your screen Wise Album here. If you go to wisealbum.com, you can create an account. I already have an account, so I'm going to click that. I have an account. I'm going to log in with my information. When I log in, I'm taken to a dashboard where I see the total number of users and the total number of albums that my organization has. Now, if you created an album right now, or if you created an organization right now, you would see a different dashboard because every user, unless they've been invited to a different organization, creates their own organization. So right now, if you go to this address, you'll see what is public, and I can drop that. I can drop that in the chat. Here we go. If you go there, you'll see what I have public on my album right now. I can edit my organization. I can change the name of my organization. I can change the logo of the organization. I can also invite other people to my organization. So right now, let's say I want to invite our moderator. So if I want to invite Cody, I can enter his name and I can send his email address. And shortly, Cody will receive an invitation via email to join my album. You can see he was added down here. He has access and he's a contributor. So the next step after you've invited somebody would be to go to edit the album. So if you go to that public link that I dropped in the chat before, you won't see all of these albums. You'll only see these two here because those are the ones that I've made public so far. If I go in and I edit an album, I can edit the pictures or the videos that are associated with it. I can make them public or I can make them private. And if I go back, I can add an album. So let's say I want to add an album that is Arches. And let's see that the description will be this. Save that. I've created a new album. I'm going to upload a cover image now. Let's put this picture of an arch in there. And we'll save. The picture comes up. Now I'll add some pictures to this album by dragging and dropping. And they've been added to the album. Now the album itself is not published yet, but now it is. Now if you're following along, if you're going to the live site that I dropped, you won't see any images yet because I haven't published the individual images. They start off unpublished. So let's say that this is going to be a series of arches. And let's say I'm going to give this the order 1. I'll save it. And it's published. Or nope, it's still not published. So you see it still doesn't have the I crossed out. So let's publish that. Great, and that takes us back to the album. Gonna do the same thing with the second. Give this an order of 2. And now we see we have the albums here. If I come back to the anonymous view and I refresh the page, still don't see the albums. Let's resave this picture. Let's resave this here. The albums. I must have some pretty strong caching set up. All right, so this is the new album that I've created. Let's say I forgot my password, which is pretty standard for me. I'm a pretty forgetful person, and if I didn't store all of my passwords, they would definitely just disappear out of my head. So if I do my email address and submit, I will shortly, and you may have to take my, you may have to trust me on this, I'll shortly get an email with password reset instructions that I will be able then to log back into my account. And that's Wise Album. Some of the challenges that I came across were setting up email to work with this application. And when it came down to it, it was because I had a typo and was trying to send email from an address that didn't exist. And Amazon doesn't like when you do that. So I had some trouble with that. I also had some trouble with getting authorization set up. And then I started reading the devise gem for Rails documentation. And that really jump-started getting the login and invitations set up. So to check it out, you can go to wisealbum.com and you can play around with it a little bit yourself. Next steps, I would add image optimization so that I'm not transferring large amounts of data back and forth from the net or from S3 to to the web, because right now it's serving everything at the original size, which can get pretty big. And I also add some video optimization as well, so that the same deal. You could upload a video and serve it in more optimized formats. If you want to check out my LinkedIn, I will drop that in the chat too. That's my LinkedIn, and my GitHub is linked in the application. And yeah, that's Wise Album.
Awesome work. Awesome stuff. Any questions for Joe? Somebody that loves the app there in the chat.
Ah, cool.
Awesome.